Hi, everyone. This is Mary Kate Lyons, as I said, from Schoology. Welcome to day 4 of LMS week. I'm a client success manager here at Schoology, and we definitely know here that adopting your first learning management system, or LMS, or replacing an existing one is a really big deal. And that's why we're hosting this event, 5 straight days of insightful discussion with different subject matter experts. Each session is going to dive into key stages of the LMS journey. So if you've joined earlier this week, you would have participated in vision setting, strategy building, all the way through to evaluating, choosing, implementing, and transforming learning with an LMS. This jam-packed schedule has something for everyone. And if you haven't signed up for any of the other sessions, I definitely encourage you to visit our landing page, schoology.com/LMS-week, and see what we've got planned. Today is a very exciting day, though, for us during LMS week. We're going to be focusing on the very important role of onboarding and implementation of an LMS. Today, Ronquillo, who's a teacher, as well as the K-12 Technology Integration Coordinator, and Gareth, who's a teacher and innovation learning leader at Troy School District, will be discussing onboarding best practices, and Ron and Gareth will be sharing from their own experience of implementing an LMS in their district. Great. So Monday's webinar explored vision setting and what that means. Thanks. Monday's webinar focused on vision setting and what that means. The next day, on Tuesday, we discuss what you need to know about a modern LMS. Wednesday, discuss key considerations and questions you should ask before selecting an LMS. And tomorrow, we're going to finish up with 4 practitioners sharing their tips on leveraging the LMS to enhance learning. Again, you can visit our landing page, schoology.com/LMS-week. And I also want to note that after this survey or this webinar, we'll be sending out a short feedback survey so you can tell us what you thought about the content and the experience during LMS week. So keep an eye out for that in the email. Also, we're on Twitter, so if you want to follow along with the hashtag LMS week, use that hashtag and tweet at Schoology so that we know you're out here. Great. So as I said, today we're going to be focusing on rolling out your LMS and practices and lessons learned. So you have myself, Mary Kate Lyons, although everyone here at Schoology calls me MK, so we're all best friends here on the webinar. You can feel free to feel that way too. We also have Gareth and Ron here, who I introduced earlier. Our agenda today, oh, sorry, go ahead and say hi, guys.
Hi, Schoology World.
Awesome. So for the agenda today, we're going to start off, I'm going to kick off by saying how Schoology thinks about onboarding and implementation ourselves and some best practices that we've found. And then we're going to let Gareth and Ron kind of dive into Troy's experience and their success that they've found in implementing and onboarding Schoology. We're going to talk through what it looks like to go from utilizing a free tool to a dedicated solution, best practices for rolling out district-wide with an LMS, focusing on those 5 lessons learned that Troy can really focus on, and those key takeaways. And of course, we will have time for your questions. So we're going to kind of run through the agenda, and I'll kick us off. So Schoology does a lot of thinking about onboarding and implementation. It's a large part of my department, but also part of our Schoology community as a whole. And many of you are probably familiar with this process, but in looking at implementing an LMS, we've broken it down into 4 particular stages. The first being planning, second, technical and platform setup, third, training and rollout, and then 4th, driving adoption. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those phases that we work through. Starting with planning, and I think frequently this tends to be an overlooked area of an onboarding process. It can be so exciting to finally choose an LMS and move forward, but the planning is really the time period where you and your district has the opportunity to focus on what the end goal is and how to get there. So you really want to make sure that that time period is being well thought of in terms of timeline, as well as vision setting for your current goals of how do we execute quickly, but also the long-term goal of an LMS at your district. The second part is a bit more technical. It's the actual nuts and bolts of having an LMS turned on for your district, getting your users, courses, enrollments all set up, and making sure that all the different tools that you use at the district are integrated into this hub that is an LMS. So focusing on that technical and platform setup. The next is arguably one of the more important pieces in an onboarding process, which is training and rollout. You've purchased this amazing tool for an LMS that's really the main goal is to help transform learning at your district. How do you train and host professional development so that your group and your teachers are well suited to move forward in utilizing an LMS in the day-to-day? Particularly that also pairs with communications and making sure it's very clear to your users and your stakeholders why you're utilizing an LMS. And then lastly, we focus on driving adoption. Now, driving adoption starts at the end of an onboarding process, and it follows through your whole life cycle with an LMS, focusing on getting those users up and running and making sure that everyone is well-versed to be able to move forward. So this is kind of the standard process that we here at Schoology follow, but would very much fit into most LMS rollouts. The second component that we always like to focus on is including the LMS rollout within your instructional strategy. Every district or school or organization has goals particular to that organization. And so you definitely want to make sure that your LMS rollout fits into those goals that are already predetermined by the district. So we help accomplish that in a number of ways by focusing on professional development, as I mentioned, keeping teaching and learning at the heart of what we're doing, and the collaboration. As you're familiar, our Schoology community is a strong one that we really like to build out and focus on, and is a great resource, as well as strategic planning. Just keeping that in mind and utilizing an instructional strategy as a roadmap for integrating an LMS is huge. And then the last part that I always like to touch base on is addressing change management. As I mentioned earlier, making a change or starting an LMS or switching to a new LMS is a huge undertaking, not only for a district and their technical team, but also for the teachers themselves, the students, the actual end users. And so we like to utilize this Noster model. Many of you may recognize this from Monday's LMS Week session with Kelly 80. And this is a great model to help identify the feelings around change. So if you're having teachers who have a lot of confusion, they're really missing that vision component. If you're getting a lot of resistance towards a change, maybe they need some incentives to really help round out their experience. So we like to focus on this, and Ron and Gareth are going to share some of their experience and some of the emotions that go along with change as well. So that's kind of an overall view of onboarding from the Schoology perspective. And now what I'm going to do is hand it over to Ron and Gareth, who can talk through their particular experience and the success that they've had in rolling out the LMS of Schoology in Troy School District.
Thanks, MK. Hi, everybody. My name is Ronquillo, and I was previously introduced, but I'll just give you a little perspective. I teach at the high school. I teach 11th and 12th graders in the morning, and in the afternoon I work on technology integration for the district. Just to give you a little bit of background on our district is about 12,000 to 13,000 students, a variety of cultures. We're located outside of Detroit. We are now in the 4th year of a one-to-one iPad rollout in the middle school. And for the last 4 years as well, we've been trying, albeit interestingly trying, on BYOD and carts and labs in grades 9 through 12. Our high school students, most of them, to the chagrin of most people, or some people at least, have access to smartphones. And as a result, a lot of them have access to the web. Our kids are high achieving. We have fun with helicopter parents sometimes. But the kids really are driven to do the best that they can. And as a result, our district tries to take that and really give them an educational opportunity that is what our superintendent says is world class. Little things about us. We passed a bond about 4 years ago when that iPad rollout started to take shape at the middle school. And the parents throughout this whole process, including the bond, I mean, they've been supported with the technology bond, but they are very involved, and they take stake in the education that we provide. So they are very they're very involved with what we do. I'm going to turn it over to Gareth here, and he's going to talk about how we as and for us, this was kind of a big change. And I guess in some ways, with a district of this size, and I'm sure some of you out there are much bigger, but it's hard to move the big cruise ship. And we had this opportunity a few years ago, and to kind of look at things and evaluate where we were and what we could do. And I'm going to give it over to Gareth for him to talk about that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gareth Eve. I'm a teacher at Smith Middle School. I've taught pretty much every subject you can imagine. Right now, my focus is in digital learning. Our big thing with adopting an LMS is, as Ron said, we are a pretty big district, but it actually started very small. And I think because I was in a digital learning classroom, I was in a computer lab, and these kids were creating all this great work, and we really needed a way for them to, share it with myself as a teacher. So rather than just keeping it on their own computer. So we were kind of kicking around different ways they could do that. And we started before we were actually one-to-one with iPads. But the issue was what we were working with when we got the iPads was not so great. And that's where, again, Schoology was a big win for us. So prior to Schoology, we had a lot of different, we were all over the place in all areas. We had our school website was through one service. We had classroom websites through a different one, a separate mailing program. We had paper everywhere. It was very much a traditional school. We were successful, but again, not quite like revolutionary. And we're really looking for that. Our district's main goal is to try to be world class by 2020. So we were really pushing for, what's next in learning and how can we really leverage those things. So we had all these things before, and it was really just the Wild West of different vendors and technologies. And I think parents were getting frustrated, students were getting frustrated, and teachers as well, because they really wanted that one place. And for us, that was really Schoology.
And just prior to that, just to show people where we were at, we had an old Gradebook. It was called Gradebook. It was kind of basically one that teachers got to log in on. And it was separate from basically everything else. And when our district was looking at trying to find ways to make a more system-like approach to all these things, we looked at that as one of the most important parts of where we were at. So in that graphic that you guys kind of see there, like all these other ones were pockets and so on, but the one that wasn't most important to parents and students and staff was Gradebook. And so we kind of took that along with this ability to get stuff off the iPad. Whereas before, I remember getting the white cords and plugging them into the computer, launching Explore, and doing that awful thing. And trying to scale that was not something that we found worked in any way. So going to this unified platform gave us this ability to kind of look at all the challenges that the district faces in terms of how do we communicate with teachers and parents and students? How do we provide a unified instruction. The last thing, and we've heard this from parents over and over again, is if a kid has English in the 7th grade with one teacher, they're doing something completely different on another type of tool, and that's not something we really wanted to see. If we're going to go one-to-one iPad, we wanted to give them a software option that was unified as well.
And personally, I think that because it grew from something small, like literally one class trying it and sharing it with the other technology teachers, and then the other technology teachers, they shared it with some of the math, English departments. I think its growth really shows that it was needed because people were adopting it really without, I hate to say it, being told what to do. They wanted this, and that's an important, I think, piece in driving it, and really showed it was a missing element to our district and student learning, most importantly.
And before, we should mention there were plans for us to go to another generic Excel-looking gradebook, and that's what was going to be it. And you could use an LMS or whatever you wanted on the side. And this really came from a group of teachers, and like Gareth said, that wanted to find a solution that could be better accessible for everyone. So to do that, and once we got all these stakeholders in, we were very mindful of people being hesitant to add one more thing. Like, that is something in our district, and I'm sure maybe, I hope in other districts, there was a fear of, oh my God, this is something new. Oh my God, this is something new. And we were very mindful of that. So in order for us to really get this integrated throughout the culture of our district, we tried to make sure every group within the district was accounted for. And if we could get them on board, then we thought the program itself would have a better success rate. The thing we didn't want to do is have this be one group, the technology people that want to do this. We wanted everybody to kind of be part of this thing we were on. So to do that, I think the most important thing to start with, and MK kind of mentioned this early on, is we address teaching and learning, and or curriculum, however you want to call it. And our idea was we needed to get their mission, the vision of the district, the mission of the district, and make our LMS, what turned out to be an LMS, fit within this whole scheme. So one of the things our curriculum and instructional specialists work on is curriculum guides, common assessments, all like class info. And if you can see on the right there, you'll see those three things: deepening learning, focusing direction, and creating a collaborative culture. Those are we call it the hubcap. I would say that is our founding principles of our district and what we try to do. So we looked at LMS as trying to make the LMS fit in all three parts of the hubcap. And so we met with curriculum and people at the high level, administrators, and tried to say, look, this is a way to standardize something so everybody has access to it and can prosper within it. And one quick story, we used to have other products where only certain people could have admin rights, where only certain people could do things, or you'd have to submit an email request. We looked at an LMS as something where teachers can own it or administrators can own it. And that to us was very important in the whole way that this would take off. Because if you could do what you wanted as a teacher, administrator, whoever, then you can find a way for it to fit what you want to do. And so we started first with curriculum. And then to get this off the ground, to go from the pilot, and just to give everybody an example, we went pilot. This was the second semester, what's our second semester. And then the following September, we went to the enterprise version where everybody was doing it. So we had two middle schools heavily pilot the our schoology, test it, kick the tires, run through it. And in that meantime, we kind of came up with all these things that you'll see on how to really scale it the following September. And giving those teachers the feedback and working with Schoology let us try to put together a plan that was feasible for us. And one of the things that we came up with that we thought would work well is to put people, when we're rolling this out, in groups that fit their content group. So math teachers were met with math teachers. And we had a math teacher from one of the middle schools lead that section when we first introduced the LMS. We showed them how shared groups could be so valuable. One of the things we used to have were the shared folders on the school server, and it just became a mess. And you can only access it here in district. And we just thought there was a better way out there. And then we created what we thought as teachers and administrators was a fair vision grid of where we were going to be this year and 3 years out. We wanted this to work. And when we say we, because it was kind of teacher grassroots started, we kind of looked at it like, how are we going to make this work in the classroom? And the most important thing was this was going to be a focus of our district that following September. So the pre-PD stuff that we all have, this was big time. This was a major component of it. It wasn't like, oh, and this was going to be our thing that we did to roll it out.
Yeah, so I think for us, as Ron was saying, having it driven from the teachers was extremely powerful. And I think we had a group of, there's probably about 40 of us, K-12, at least one in every building, and some with two, that were really going all in on this LMS and Schoology. And they were able to not only experience it themselves, and these are people that they were definitely into tech, but not just tech teachers. They were all sort of content areas, and that really helped with the buy-in for, I think, other teachers. They were experiencing firsthand what worked. But we had to be realistic and say, okay, while we're here, not everyone's at the same level we're at. There's going to be people that are not going to be into the early adoption, and they're going to be looking for something simple. And for a lot of people that might have been resisting because it's, again, one new thing, we really tried to push a slow growth to really make sure, we laid that foundation and we're building on something that, would scare away the rest of our staff, because we really have to look at it as, hey, if only 20% of our staff is actually utilizing this, that's a loss for us. We were trying to get as many on board as possible. So you can see in this chart here, we really had like a 3-year plan with levels A, B, and C. And we looked at different functions and saying, okay, this function's very important and we can leverage this to improve student learning. So this has to be a focus for us. And then in there, we started, again, slow. We got the buy-in. If you look, for example, we talk about the materials. So materials, obviously very important. You got to be able to access your content. We had that before, but not to the extent Schoology had it, where we could add in video, we could work with audio, we could put images, discussion boards. Really, we haven't found many limits to what we can add in that material. It can be links and articles and all sorts of different great interactive content. And but we started with simply adding the syllabus and class information. And it's so non-threatening that, hey, we have this on here, we can get this. And a lot of people, once they did that, they moved to level B without us even really serving on a platter to them. So it was really great to see. And of course, there's some that ran wild with it, and that was great. And they were really pushing and spreading this, not just through the innovation learning leaders. So yeah, again, to year 2, so we started to get the course into units. So rather than having just 64 files in your course, let's get this organized. Are you organizing by chapters? Are you going by dates? What works for that teacher? And I think when you give those options, people, they really appreciate that and are more likely to buy in. As soon as you have to say, it must be this way, I think you get a bit of that that pushback.
And there were things that, like, they felt good when they finally got it was so, like, we made goals so simple that when they got them, they could say, that's it. And that felt good for them. So then they looked at it like, all right, we can do this, or that's it. And the same thing happened with the gradebook. Like, we made sure that first PD day in September, their gradebook was set up and some materials were on and a couple calendar events, and that was it. And that made people be like, okay, now I can get started. And I think that gives them hope in moving forward. And we kept reiterating over and over again, look, if you do this, you'll never have to do it again because you can copy from year to year. So by making something that they don't have to necessarily do again, or they can make it better, they started to think, wow. Because a lot of, like, classroom websites, I know you guys probably had it, they're so static. And they just you look back and you're like, wow, this is Ronquillo in 2013's class. And that is something that we've seen an LMS do a better job at than a classroom website. So for them to get the gradebook there, and some of them, like some of these teachers went from paper gradebooks to now a gradebook that was live. And like, that's a big step, but we wanted to be mindful of that. We didn't want to jump into, you know, level C, or there's so many features on these LMSs that are just so awesome, but a lot to get everybody on board, you're going to have to skip some of those for now or have them find them on their own. So that's why we stuck with these, and we'd be happy to share this with anybody. This is kind of where we're at. It's really funny to us that we made this plan, and like to see where we're at is entertaining to see how as a district we've kind of evolved and what things have taken off that we didn't even see happening. So to really implement and how to make this thing work, we broke everything down. I mean, in some ways we did a who, what, where, when, why, how, and we answered our questions, and then they kind of let us do it. Like, we had a couple of administrators and our assistant superintendent that were just on board and willing to go with what was going to be something that could be really cool if they took the risk. And our superintendent gave a speech. The prior year was like, take a risk in the classroom, do something, you blah, blah, blah. And for us to do this in a district that some ways moves slowly was humongous. Like, I have a lot more gray hairs than I used to, but in some ways we're farther ahead now. It was going to be a struggle of a first year, and we tried to make that first year as seamless for the teachers as possible. So to do that, first thing we did was we kept it very simple. As we kind of mentioned, we only touched on basically the whole first 6 months. We did 3 things, and that was adding materials, how to add a calendar event, because parents and administrators really wanted that, and how to use the gradebook. And one of the things that was interesting about those is we had to make the thing about going full this was we had to, like everybody, had to make some changes that were different. And that's something that I think you have to be okay doing. But we were okay with that. And I would say one of the things that I would look for is that's okay. As, how do I say this? Sorry, give me 1 second. I would still go all in. like we talked to a lot of other districts beforehand, and one of the things is other districts might use a Gradebook from some other website. I would never do that. And this is probably just my opinion, but the fact that we had everybody using one website, not having to go back and forth, all that stuff that Gareth talked about before, we could say, look, it's all on one website and let's go from there. And that is just so much different than where we were from when data processing chose the Gradebook, attendance was somewhere else, curriculum stuff was on another website. This was keeping it simple, all on one website. So everything we did at each building, at each district level PD we ever had was these items. And to get them on to one standard level to make people happy. Because we had parents, and we didn't want parents to be able to see one Schoology page and have it to be loaded with awesome stuff and another to be empty. We wanted to make this something that, at the very least, every teacher has materials, calendar events, and of course, use of the Gradebook.
Yeah, and I think to support this, it was, as I kind of mentioned earlier, it was looking for that building level support. That really was a big push from, central office really saying, hey, you guys are the experts on this. Let's keep this there. I think teachers are much more comfortable going to a peer, and going to someone in their building rather than always seem to be like waiting for this sort of voice out there or, someone just some of that connection. And oftentimes, so I took this role at my building and it was just so easy to just find the time to, hey, why don't you just come down and I can show you this. And then they get that. And then it really, it spread so nicely. It was just, they had this, now they could share this with other people. And although I had the title of this, I feel almost selfish saying I was the only one there because I really had a team of people that could lead their department. And that was really great to see. And I mean, for me, call me a nerd, but I was actually excited to see when people were like coming to me and saying like, hey, I tried this, I had this awesome discussion board, or I had my students in orchestra were doing play tests at home, recording their audio, and I was able to check them. It was really like tear rolling down my face. Maybe not that far, but we were just excited to see like people were adopting this and saying that how do we live without this? And I think just having that building level support, we could work together amongst the buildings and really form that team there. But it was really a no pressure situation, I think, from innovation learning leaders' perspective, but also from the teachers, because I felt like it was much more friendly of conversations rather than here's a seminar about this. I think those things are important, and we did build those in, but having the option just for like a 1v1 conversation was really empowering.
And one of the things I loved that one of the buildings did was one of the buildings has made it's only teachers, no administrators, and I think in some ways that's really cool too, but it's a building tech help Schoology group, and they can ask one another questions on there and answer quickly. And that is kind of like, whereas before it was a lot of top-down instruction, at this point it's like people asking people. And if everybody's on the same page, that means the highest and the lowest are using the same technology. No matter whatever the technology is, that makes things easier. Because people, like Gareth said, we had no idea how to do audio submissions as a tech teacher and an economics teacher, but we could lean on other people to be able to spread the word through that. And they were willing to help us because they didn't look at this like it was just a top-down thought. An LMS is helpful because, look, as a teacher, it's an easy way to organize things. And that makes things simpler, and so your class isn't worrying about other things when you just want to just teach.
And I think just to kind of wrap this piece up is At the building level, oftentimes my answer, and I think this is okay because sometimes it can be a little scary, like I'm the one in charge of this. My answer for questions was, I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to find that out. And that really unlocked, once I found that out, I could share that with the other buildings, and that was able to really get the ball rolling on that. Because I think as a building level leader, it's okay to say that. You know, if you hear that from sort of a top down, they say, I don't know, it sort of leaves maybe a bad taste in their mouth. But as a peer and a colleague, you can say that and say, hey, I don't know how to do that, but maybe we can find out together. And you hope your building level supports their more techie people and able to do a simple Schoology blog search or something like that where they can maybe find that information. But I think that showed some vulnerability, and I think the teachers actually responded well to that.
And I think it brought other, the nice thing is sometimes our schools tend to be segregated in that they don't find ways to talk to one another. And this gave them not only the innovative learning leads, but the other teachers, because we got them working in content area groups in the beginning and curriculums on board, they could talk with one another about the cool things they found out on an LMS and how they could share it within times they met. So that, it really gives you credence. It's not one more thing if it's something if other teachers think can make your life as a teacher easier. So that's that. Our next one was something I think is so important and things we didn't see coming and learned from. But once we announced this to our parents, and as I mentioned, the parents are involved. We got a lot of interesting things that came up from the parents. Parents were concerned. This was a huge change. We went from a grade book that was updated maybe every 3 weeks to live grading. And that was new. And we had kids on something they looked as social media, which I guess is viable, and you have to deal with that. Like they looked at this and they're like, what is this? Why can all the kids see what each other is doing and blah, blah, blah. That's interesting. And we didn't see that coming. And as a result, to kind of stem this and the fact that a lot of our parents are even on these Facebook groups where they all talk, we held a parent night. And the parent night, I have never been so nervous because I thought we were going to get annihilated. And they just really wanted to know what was going on and to get them vested. Like we had a parent group, we have a parent tech group, and they worked with us previously on what parents are looking for. And we created a PowerPoint and kind of led them on what Schoology or any LMS can do. That a lot of these parents have no idea what an LMS is. They've never seen it. They get worksheets and a book. So this was something dramatically new for them. And we showed them what it can do. We showed them the goods, and they brought up cool concerns that I would do this again in a heartbeat because it puts them on board. But they made us look